This is going to be our government audit committee, for April 9th. I'm just going to go ahead, if you guys don't mind, we'll walk through the agenda and then we're going to move it around a little bit just to give people the time to call in. Right now, we'll start with the 2020 audit. As a little bit of backup, the audit committee met the last week of March to approve and recommend for approval the 2019 audit for Paris submission. So we have we'll be adopting that in the full meeting. But as part of that discussion, one of the things that came up was the fact that we've been carrying the Brionics and roadblock items over year. And it was a discussion at the audit committee last time to sort of write that down once and for all. So I know, Kevin, we haven't had conversation with them recently, but can you just give us kind of the last interaction we had with those companies so that just as a reminder for the rest of the board?
Is that me, Lori?
Yes.
Okay, so the last time we had I had any contact with Brionics was when they actually came to the board meeting. I had a number of emails and telephone conversations with Ernie Green. I had got them to come down. I think he came down with a lady who was his partner or something. And they made a presentation to the board in executive session. And that was the last full contact. I reached out after talking to Joel last week. I did send him an email and I did not get any response. As far as the one other project, the other, what was the name of it? New Hampton or something?
Yeah, New Hampton Technologies / Road.
I never had any contact with them at all. I never was asked to have any contact with them at all. And so I've not reached out. I don't even know how to do that. I don't have a file on them.
Right.
And lastly, that was really the DOT and the Port Authority about the money for the Drury Road. That was the last discussion we had. Again, was also in a board meeting where originally the board said they wanted me to write another letter to the Port Authority. I think it might have been Ed Harrison at the time, or maybe Mike Torelli. And then I said, no, don't. We're going to contact them. And I don't know whether Bob Armistead did it or Lori, you and Vinny had a conversation with them.
It was actually back when
the money's not there.
Yeah. That was so the last time we had any interaction with them, I think, was when Jim Petro was still with us, and then I had a subsequent conversation with Mike Torelli after that. So, but again, it was the same thing. It was just that there's nothing there to chase. So, Joel, are you back with us?
Yes.
Okay. So, do you want to just, in light of not having RJ with us right at this second, you want to explain just again as a refresher what we'd like to do with these items for the 2020 audit?
Sure. So just to give a little, some figures to this, in note number 5 of the financial statements refers to Brionics, and we have a note receivable for $248,083. This was basically offset in our financials several years ago by the auditors. What it means is if we write this off the book, in other words, remove the note, it has no impact on our financials because right now the financials do not reflect we will be receiving it. As far as the development costs having to do with Drury Lane, the amount there is $161,750, and the same type of offset was set up for that. And the third is New Hampton Technologies, and the amount there is $177,692, and the same goes for that. All three have been set up as an offset reserve. So if we don't receive the money, it's not going to impact. I just want to make one point that if the board decides to take an action to remove these, what will happen is for the fiscal year 2020, the notes will be removed from the notes as they read now will be removed and changed to say that they were written off totally. It does not preclude us, if we ever receive the money in the future, the IDA can accept those funds. So I don't want anyone to think that if for whatever reason a part of these monies come in, we will be in a position to accept that. But by taking this action, we're saying that we do not expect to receive any of it.
Joel, Ed, Diana, I think you reversed the numbers. I think the money from the state to 250 and from Green is a 150.
Ed, I'm looking at I'm reading it from the notes in the financial statement. So
Okay.
I'm hoping I read it correctly, but.
Okay, I thought you said the state owed us 156. I think the state owes us 250.
That's on.
All right, so I could read you the note just for everyone's verification. All right, that's all right. It's under note 7. That's right. Under note 17, which is titled development costs, the development costs of $161,750 represent expenditures incurred during 2007 and 2008 relating to the potential acquisition of a 58-acre parcel and a 283-acre parcel located on Drury Lane in Newburgh. The agency has set up an impairment reserve of 161. So, Ed, you're right. Originally, it probably was 250. I don't recall why that was reduced down to 161.
Okay. I just thought, because when you mentioned Ernie Green at the 250, I believe Green's was 150. I think somebody might have reversed those numbers. Maybe. Just check on that, because I think the state was 253 when we bought it, and I think Ernie Green's was like in the 150s, I think. So we have to check it today, but.
No problem. We'll check. We'll verify it's correct. Not a problem.
All right. I just think they were the right numbers, but that's okay. We have to do it today. Okay.
Provided that we get the numbers clarified, are the members comfortable with sort of writing these down for future audits? And then, if we do receive them, obviously, we can still count them, but it doesn't, doesn't do us any good to carry them forward anymore. Is everybody comfortable with that?
Yeah, I am. That's Jim.
Yeah, I am too, but I think I would like us to try to attempt again somehow. I don't know how to do that, Kevin, but we can talk about that. I just don't want to let these guys totally off the hook. I mean, I hear you.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, we'll keep working on it. Maybe we'll just
200.
put it as
Brionics, $233,000. That's noted in note 5. That's the correct number.
Okay. All right. And I thought the state was in a 250 range, but I could be wrong.
I think there was a recoup at some point. But
Look it up now. Hold on. See if I can find it.
Okay.
Right now. You want to wait for Kevin to find that to motion to recommend this to the full board?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yes.
Hi there. Can I interrupt? I'm sorry. Someone's on. The number is 845-469-1034. Can you please identify yourself?
Yes, that's Alan Standish at Satin Fine Foods.
Thank you.
Hi, Alan.
Good afternoon, Lori.
We'll be moving around to you in just a moment.
I'm gonna.
No problem.
161. On the airport, the Drury Lane, I'm looking at Phil's old file,
Mm-hmm.
and it seems to indicate that the numbers got it at 250,000.
That's right.
And
I agree. I know those numbers are 250. I know that. I swear to you, Kevin. I was highly involved in that.
now, if that's the right document. It's just something with the FAA.
So I think it's safe to say, though, I mean, we can put this together, but there's obviously a lot of information that we're going to have to go through. So would you guys like to recommend writing this down?
Certainly, Lori. Why don't we write down the numbers you think are correct today and then keep researching it and get the right numbers, I guess, right?
Or we can delay until next month if you guys are more comfortable with that. That's fine. I mean, because this is for the 2020 audit. So it's something that we can certainly do. We can put it off till next month and then come back and make, a fuller,
Okay.
to make sure that everything is clarified. Because there has been a lot of change, I remember, since the beginning. Obviously, in the office, I know that we have physical documents. I don't have them that are online right now to access.
Sure.
Certainly, we've had a lot of, I know Drury Lane one, there was some movement on it, and then it kind of went back. There was some recovery, I think, a little bit, but I think it's going to be a lot of information that we don't all want to sit around and wait for Kevin to go through Phil Crotty's old files.
Right.
Well, I think at the end of the day, we're writing it down. We just need to get I would be okay with authorizing the write down. We need to just get back to us whatever the number was.
Okay.
Or do you need a specific number in the motion?
I don't think that we do.
Okay, I agree with Jim.
That's just
That,
let's
we'll write it down and then figure out the numbers, I guess, right?
We'll confirm.
Yeah, I mean, it's we're looking for $100,000, either if it's Joel's number, or your number, Eddie, right? I mean, if it's 250.
Right. I just know that when we had early discussions about it, it was like 250, and that's what the number was. I think that number is correct. But like Lori said, we might have got some payback. I don't remember any payback, but
there was like an $8,000 something or other that happened at one point. But again, what we'll do too is we'll go through the older audits, and not certainly, it wouldn't be in the last 3 or 4 years, but we'll go back a little bit further, and because that's where it would be documented very clearly that there would be a change. So we will confirm that, and we can make that motion with that understanding.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
Motion.
Okay. All in favor?
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay. So since we have Mr. Standish here, we'll move on the agenda over to Satin Fine Foods. So if you guys recall, this time last year, we reported to the board that we had one item that was one failure to comply with our annual compliance documentation request. It was Satin Fine Foods, who it was the first year that they had not replied to our audit information request. And the board took an action to move forward with a recapture, which would have been to terminate the final year of that pilot. In the ensuing months, Mr. Standish from Satin Fine Foods has reached out to us, and Vinny and I have spoken with him a number of times. And before we file any paperwork to complete the action, he requested an opportunity to speak to the board members. There was some confusion around address changes and, obviously a history of compliance. So, Alan, I'll turn it over to you if you'd like to address our audit committee. You're muted. Okay. You should be good now.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Okay. Lori, thank you for the introduction. First, I hope everybody is home and safe. Next, I just wanted to talk about the Satin Fine Foods side of the situation that occurred last year when the board decided to cancel our last year of our pilot. I want to tell you a little bit about Satin Fine Foods. We started here in Sugarloaf, New York in 2001 in a bi-level house with an owner, Kevin O'Reilly. And he was able to grow that company over a period of time where we now own our building on 32 Leone Lane in Chester. What we do, we make cake icing. And if you were to ask myself or maybe some of the other professionals in the area, it's my opinion that we're one of those companies that we're proud to say with the help of the IDA and others, we were able to grow our company. Now, what occurred from our point of view back in 2019, and I remember this like it was yesterday, I received a text message from our IT person here at Satin Fine Foods, and it basically said, one of my friends contacted me they heard Lori, I suppose, doing an interview on Wall Radio. And some say that it seemed as it was casting Satin in a bad light, which I couldn't understand. I didn't know who Lori was, and I didn't know what this person was talking about. So I reached out to him again, and I said, can you get me the transcript of the radio program? Because I'm not sure what you're talking about. And we even joked a minute because he said, a buddy told me. And I said, buddy like the Cake Boss? Because we're familiar with them, and he's one of our customers. After understanding what actually transpired on Wall Radio, I contacted the IDA, admittingly so, a little heated, and couldn't get a response back from the IDA. And I called again the following week, and then I talked to the owner, and I talked to the finance director, and all the board of directors. I said, does anybody know anything about what's going on here with the IDA? Because something was on the radio, et cetera. And then April 17th, April 15th, still no contact yet, no communication with Satin and the IDA after multiple phone calls. There was a piece that came out in the TH record, and it was using, and I'm going to quote, companies not cooperating and no excuse for this. And we're going to claw back these monies. And again, we have no idea what is occurring. Then we understand, okay, we have to file for the IDA, which we have been doing for 7 years straight without issue, without any issues at all. Once we understood that our paperwork had not been filed, we immediately filed that paperwork on April 17th and got it into the IDA. But what I want to tell you is what transpired, why Satin Fine Foods did not submit the paperwork. This, to me, was not intentionally done. There was no intent. There was no motive. It was simply a pattern that was happening the past 7 years that was broken. So the pattern was the IDA was using an accounting firm that they were sending the documents to, and the documents would then get to Satin Fine, and Satin Fine would fill these documents out, and we would send them back to the accounting firm in which you guys are using. And usually everything's fine. It's only 2 pieces of paper. It's fairly easy to do, and we're always compliant with it. We don't have any issues. Never missed a tax payment, etc. So starting to unfold this, we began to understand what occurred. So we contacted the accounting firm in which you use, and we also use them. And we said, hey, listen, we didn't get these documents. What happened? And they said, well, you know, we do have the documents here, the original documents, and it was returned to sender. And it was returned to sender. Why? Because Satin Fine Foods' old address from 2001, when we first started, was being used. Okay, nobody really realized that because the same person was sending these documents to Satin for 7 years straight, and it was coming from the accounting firm and not the IDA to the correct address. So from what we understand, there was a change in personnel at the accounting firm who was unfamiliar with the pattern that Satin Fine Foods was in for 7 years, understood our address because they're also our accounting firm, would send us over the paperwork. So we were not able to comply with sending the paperwork back by the March deadline because we never received it. But as soon as we understood what happened, we very quickly got this back to you guys. Now, I also want to tell you guys that we are not a very big company. We're a small company, and as others may be around. Hello? Can you still hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So again, we're pretty small as compared to other companies around us. But I think that from what we do, we're a very good, responsible company here, probably an ideal company that the IDA looks at. We are proud sponsors and donators to the Hudson Valley Food and Beverage, the Orange County Land Trust, the Orange County Partnership, the Goshen Historic Tract, Knights of Columbus. I could go on and on and on. And when we have extra funds, we try to take care of the people that have always supported us around us. So what I'm asking the board to do is understand that there was no malice here or intent, that this was an administration error, that the paperwork never got to Satin Fine Foods because our address from back in 2012, when we applied with you guys, was never changed over, I feel, at the IDA specifically. But we never communicated at all with the IDA. It was always through the accounting firm in which you use, which had our address. So if they saw the wrong address, it was never brought to our attention. They just processed the paperwork as it normally is. And I am hoping that today, when you guys understand really that there was no reason for us to defraud or have malice or bad intent, that you reverse your decision to terminate our final year of the pilot. A few $1,000s to us is very important. It really is. It helps us grow and it helps us support other businesses and it helps us take care of our employees. When we filed for the IDA piece back in 2012, we had 25 employees. And I'm proud to say today that we have 63 employees and 56 of those employees live here, are residents of Orange County. So instead of looking for this reason of this address to penalize us, I hope you'll find a reason to not penalize us. And I want to bring up one other thing too that I think is critical. In our documents, our IDA legal documents, there's a period here where it says a period to cure. We were never notified of a period to cure any default that would have happened, nothing at all. It wasn't until, I believe, July, where I was able to, not getting a hold of and leaving messages at the IDA for Lori, I wasn't able to get a hold of her. So I decided I'm going to send an email. And I did. I sent an email to, I think, Ms. Boris, I believe, on July 22nd. And that's when we started dialogue with myself, Lori, and Vinny. And I thank you both for calling me back. And I hope you understand the situation. And once again, I hope the board can reverse its decision. We certainly would appreciate that. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
Eddie, any questions?
No, I'm sure if Lori was communicating, it was based on what she thought was right. But if there's an error, I'm sure we can look at this.
So we did, just so you guys know, we did have, Kevin was also part of these conversations as well. We did some communicating with Satin Fine Foods attorney as well. There were some opportunities to correct addresses. I mean, really I don't think anybody's interested in going tit for tat. So just what I want to communicate to from the IDA's perspective was that it was I would say we had a process in place to update and fix any address. We did not get that information from Satin Fine Foods, but through whatever means they were firms in years past. So, I mean, that issue has been resolved because but Satin Fine Foods did update the address on the most recent audit confirmation letter. They did respond in time this year. But again, this was just something that it's fully obviously a board decision and wanting to make sure that if you guys have any questions. Did we lose Jim? Sorry. Looks like we lost DeSalvo.
Lori?
Yeah.
Don't forget, Kathy Hunter also tried to contact them by phone before the March deadline.
Right.
Was told at one point that the treasurer who had taken care of it every year had retired, that there was a new treasurer. She left a phone message for that new treasurer and no one ever got back to her, just so the board knows the whole story.
Thank you, Kevin. I had forgotten that.
No, and I certainly appreciate that. And that is true. Our treasurer did retire in January, and we did have a new treasurer. And we don't have any record of anybody calling this office. However, it most likely did happen. But the extension that she may have been calling was the old treasurer's extension and leaving voicemails on that Satin Fine Foods did not check. But however, there was a message on there that introduced the new treasurer. And I was with the new treasurer that afternoon, and I was with the owner the day that we understood that there may have been a violation from Wall Radio. and none of us were ever contacted or told. And we would be the first company to jump very, very quickly and do what we need to do. Again, we have a track record of being on time with everything that we do, and we run very, very tight. And I truly believe this was, again, a pattern that was happening for 7 years, an oversight on an address at the accounting firm. And as soon as we recognized that there was a problem from an administrative standpoint, we immediately corrected it.
Okay. So do any of you guys, Salvo, Dados, Diana, do any of you have any questions, or is this something you want to kind of digest and then we will readdress? It's up to you guys.
Yeah, I think we get back to him. Not a problem.
I appreciate it. And again, I do want to bring your attention to a piece that's important, and that Satin Fine Foods can be found on Google. Satin Fine Foods can be found anywhere. We are all accessible. Our board of directors, not just our treasurer. And we were just a little taken back that it hit the radio and hit the newspaper before there seemed to be anybody trying to contact us. And again, there was no malice, there was no intent. I truly believe this was an administration thing. We have 7 years in a row where we had never had any issues with you guys. But thank you for taking a second look at it.
These are all public meetings, so everything we do, unfortunately, is open to everyone. And so we get the distinction of being publicized no matter what we do. But yes, thank you for attending today. We will discuss it and we will get back to you.
Excellent. Thank you. I wish you all the best. Safety and health. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on, the next item we should address would be, I believe Mike Cray is on the phone. So we had the audit committee along with the Kevin Loki have been obviously auditing a number of our projects. One of those is the Craftify Brewery, which is in Warwick, next to, actually, strange as it is, our accelerator there. A number of issues have come up in addition to some labor compliance issues. There's also, we were made aware last month that the sales and use tax form was still being used while it had been expired as of December 31st of 2019. So in addition to that, there was also an escrow fund that had been depleted and needed to be replenished. Kevin sent out a letter to Mike Cry, and we received actually today, Joel went to the office and received a check for that $2,000. So you guys saw a copy of that invoice in your packet. It's also something that we discussed a number of meetings ago. So we have collected the money for the escrow to continue the labor policy audits. Mike is joining us today because he would like an extension of his sales tax exemption, but I know it's been a few months since we've met. There was also Kevin Loki, I want to make sure. Marty, do you have Kevin muted?
Sorry?
So Kevin Loki's also on the call. Kevin, would you just bring us as a reminder kind of where we were last with the labor policy and how, excuse me, there were some concerns about, we had denied a waiver last month. Can you just refresh everybody's memory on that?
Sure. So the waiver was submitted for a drywalling company called JB Insulation. The value of their contract is $12,850. The exemption was submitted December 12th, 2019. So we looked over the 4 physical bids that were submitted. Mike also asserted that he contacted 11 companies altogether. And based on what we received from the other local bids, we found that waiver to be approved on our end. So I did let Mike know that that was going to final verification for the board for your meeting that was on January 9th. They were, however, looks like the company JB Installation was on site, as we were alerted to, because material was dropped off to the site. So the issue at hand was that the company was on site before a waiver was officially granted and given, and that company obviously was not able to meet the local labor compliance for 85% overall as a result of that.
I'm muted. Sorry. Do any of the members have any questions before we I'll invite Mike to make his request for his extension?
No.
Mike Gatos,
Yes.
it's Jimmy. You have anything to weigh in on that? Does that sound legit or what?
No, I know I was talking to Kevin Loki. I know they were there prior. So I think Kevin has his findings. He knows that they were there working prior to. So I think that speaks for itself.
Yeah, on January 13th, the labor report for the week prior, the company JB Insulation was not listed. However, a person on the job site did send pictures of work trucks to Mike, which he had sent to me, showing that this company was in fact present on the job. They had already been distributing material around the site for workers on the project. So that being said, I mean, it was apparent that this company was hired and had a presence on the site, you know, maybe not a physical working presence in the sense, but they were at least dropping off material and ready to work before the IDA had officially granted the approval. And I believe that's what the issue is here. Obviously, there have been more than one waiver submitted for this project. So the procedure of how those worked should have been fairly clear.
Listen, I'm all for waivers when they're necessary, and I just think the IDA goes out of their way to give funds to people to help them, and the least they can do is try to hire local labor. And if their methods of doing it are not clear or shifty, and I'm not saying they were, but everybody kind of knows what the intent is to do. So, Kevin, based on your findings, that's what we'll go by.
Yeah, and I mean, again, this is a drywall company. This wouldn't be considered a specialty work. I mean, Mike can tell you that there's a number of drywall companies out there. And again, we were submitted 4 bids that Mike had given us, 2 of which were in the form of text message screen captures. And we have changed the language on waiver exemption applications now, so that we will not be counting those anymore. Mike did say he contacted 11 companies total. We don't have, obviously all of those bids to verify that, but there are certainly a number of drywalling companies in the area. Granted, though, I will also say that certainly there's a lot of projects that are very busy right now, and the labor market is pretty thin, or at least was thin, when kind of this was all happening with all the activity going on. But nonetheless, Mike has a point. The whole point of this program is to try to utilize as much local labor as possible. And for something like a drywaller, you would think there would be something available within a more competitive price range than the bid that he eventually went with.
And Loki, what's the calling you by the company name anyway? What's the?
Yeah,
what's
fine. It's my last name too.
What's the outfits? I'm remembering this now. What's the outfit out of Pennsylvania or something, or Jersey?
JB Insulation. Yeah, they're out of PA.
Okay. So Lori, what are our options?
So, well, first, that was already denied, so that would still be
right.
That was just as a reminder. Right now,
right. Okay.
There's 2 things. First is that Mike is here on the call. We can have Marty unmute him. He wanted to request an extension of his sales tax exemption. I think we should allow him to do that and then go into a very quick executive session to discuss that. Kevin, that's doable, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
I'm sorry, Lori, who am I unmuting?
Well, you have him labeled as Alan, but it would be Mike. The 914.
Okay. There you go.
Mike, is that you? Are you there?
Yes, Mike here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. So what
okay.
And present I know you we'd had a conversation on the phone. Vinny and Mike and I all spoke a few weeks ago actually it was probably now a month or 2 ago, prior to the last canceled. So he wanted to express his request for an extension, and go ahead.
Lori, can I real quick just respond to what Kevin was talking about, since he's on the phone as well? With the sheetrock.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So as Kevin mentioned, we were having a hard time finding a local sheetrocker, which does sound kind of surprising because you would think sheetrocking is like a very common trade and that it's not a very skilled workforce, but we actually reached out to, and we documented all this and did provide it to Kevin. We not only reached out to companies individually, but we reached out to other builders and said, hey, do you know any sheetrockers? And all the builders we spoke to said they're all busy. They're hard to come by, and they also too were having a hard time finding sheetrockers. So 11 local companies is quite a bit of companies to reach out to, and as you can imagine, that actually takes quite a bit of time, because you're setting up individual meetings with each. First you have to call, reach out to the contractor, then they need to actually come out, see the job, then they need some time to prepare a bid, which could be up to a week, sometimes 2 weeks. So if you're doing that with 12 companies, we started that process in November and spent over 2 months trying to find a local sheetrocker. So it's not like we did not put forth a good effort. And in fact, we actually reached out to Kevin during the process and said, hey, just so you know, we're about halfway through this. We've reached out to a bunch of sheetrockers, and we also explained this to Kevin that some came out, they didn't provide bids because they looked at our job and they said, this is, I'm a 1 or 2 man sheetrocker. I do local residential houses. I can't do, I just can't bid your job. I'm not going to bid your job. It's too big of a job. Other people said, I'm just too busy. They came out and they looked at it and they're like, I don't have the time to do the work. So that's the reason we didn't get 11 bids, because frankly, some of the contractors didn't even want to bid. So in addition to that, we actually reached out to Kevin and said, hey, we are having a hard time finding a local sheetrocker. We are going to need a sheetrocker. And so Kevin actually provided us 3 other contacts that we could contact, because again, we wanted to be proactive. We know how the waivers work. We know what the requirements are. We were documenting our due diligence, and we reached out to he gave us 3 more names. We reached out to all 3 of those names. That took another 2 weeks or so, because again, by the time that we called them the same day, I believe, I actually remember him emailing us around 12, a list of 3 names. I called them by 1 p.m. All 3 of them had been called, because we need to keep our construction moving. I mean, it's as probably most of you know, time is money, and construction is very expensive, and we're not a big company at all, so we're tight, very tight as it is. So anyway, I was extremely quick with calling these trades. All 3 of them responded to me. One of them, over the phone, I kind of explained the job to them. They said they were union and they weren't going to be competitive. They still ended up giving us a bid, but they didn't think it was going to be a good fit for them. The 2 other trades, I don't know their company's names. I'm sure Kevin does, because we deal with a lot of different trades. They both came out and they both bid, and they were well over the 10th. Like, one of the bids, just to give you perspective, this was $12,000 worth of work. One of those bids came in at $45,000. So we're not talking a 10% difference. You're talking a 300% increase in price. So I just want to point out that I don't know how else to say, we've made a very clear due diligence effort. And then Kevin actually, so based on that fact that the pricing wasn't there, we were having a hard time finding someone in the first place, and we submitted 4 other bids that were not competitive to the bid that we received. Kevin approved that waiver request. So I was under the impression that once that was approved, we were allowed to start. Apparently, it had not gone to the board yet, and then the board decided not to approve it. So I guess because they delivered materials, even though they weren't actually doing work, but they delivered materials. So I guess that's why the board didn't approve it. But I just want to be clear that we had received approval, and we had received approvals on waivers requests from Kevin before. And my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, but he had told us in the past that once their team approved it, they're the people that we've been supplying all the paperwork to and doing all the documentation, that we were okay to start. That's how it worked with us on a previous request. So this is literally the first time that I've even heard why this waiver was denied, and Kevin didn't reach out to us and explain this timing thing. And I'll also just point out that, the sheet, again, we're talking about 2-3 days of work. So this, from a construction perspective, we kind of have keep moving. And this process started in November. They were on site, and I don't know the exact dates. I'm sure Kevin does. He has them handy, but 2.5 months later. So we literally don't have the ability to be more proactive than that and to just shut down our construction and not move forward. Frankly, we can't even afford it. So from our perspective, we thought we were in compliance. We did, we reached out to 12 trades, we documented it, we supplied it to the Loki firm, they approved it, and we were okay to work. So I'm a little surprised to hear what I was just hearing, that this was, we were considered like out of compliance, and that we were, again, we thought we did everything that the IDA requested us to do. Again, that's just kind of our perspective. So, that's pretty much my response to that. I don't know if you want to comment back to that, or you want me to go into the sales tax, but I just wanted to clarify what we were doing in relation to the sheetrockers.
One of the important things to note is that while we almost always follow the direction of Loki Brill, it is always the IDA's decision about whether or not to approve or deny a waiver. And I know we work very closely with Loki Brill for a number of years now, and it's never really been expressed to us, and certainly I don't believe that it's been expressed to anyone else, that they were the ultimate decision maker when it comes to granting exemptions. So I am sorry that was the impression you were under, but it is still ultimately a board decision. Certainly, whenever a waiver is submitted for review, it's not necessarily that it's a foregone conclusion that it will be approved and that work can begin. Of course, we understand construction timeline challenges, but I think that there's also a lot of give and take that has to be done with any of these labor policies. One of the things that the IDA takes very seriously is making sure that labor policy is complied with. So I don't know that this would be necessarily such a surprise, as we have had this conversation in the past, but I don't know, board members, if any of you had anything beyond that you wanted to contribute, or if you wanted to move on to the request for the sales tax exemption.
You can move on.
I would just say that, again, I can actually probably provide this email in writing. And I fully understand that the board has the ultimate decision on approving it. However, we were actually told that when we were allowed to start is when we first received approval. And I actually believe I have that in writing from an email. So even if that was misinformation, I just want to say that is the information that we received. So that's what we were going under the impression. That's what we were using. So,
well, I would say that that waiver has already been processed. So why don't you go ahead and talk very quickly, because it's now 10:120, quickly about your request to extend your sales tax exemption.
Yeah, so just with the sales tax exemption, we received a letter from the attorney on February 24th. We received the letter that our sales tax exemption had expired as of December 31st, 2019. This is the first notification that we received of that. And we're requesting that it get extended, because so far we've only claimed like roughly 50,000 of the 100,000 sales tax exemption that we were approved for. And without that remainder of the 40 to 50,000, it is going to make a massive financial burden on our company. As you can imagine, construction has been incredibly difficult, and just similar to what Satin Fine Foods was talking about before, as being a small company, we are a very small company. I am one of 3 employees, and I manage all of the construction, all of the insurance, taxes, state compliance reporting, and actually do physical construction on site. So for us to miss this was definitely an oversight, and I apologize for that, but I'm just asking that you will help support us, because this COVID-19 has made our construction even more difficult. We're having a hard time getting people actually out there to work. So we're already kind of in a financial burden, not to mention our main business is manufacturing beer and selling that beer on draft to accounts. All bars and restaurants are closed right now. So we now also have our sales cut by 90%. So this is a very crucial and important benefit that we were expecting to receive from the IDA. And I just hope you'll understand the severity of not extending that and what that would do to our organization. And like I said, I wish that there would have been some notification prior to the actual expiration. I realize that the burden is on us as an organization, but it would have been extremely helpful if we received any notification whatsoever, phone, email, or letter prior to the expiration. We would have happily extended that. Again, we were not aware that it needed to be extended. And so, you know, we're just really hoping that the IDA will work with us, and, you know, whatever paperwork it needs to file, we can file very quickly. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much where we're at with the sales tax exemption.
Okay, so that being said, what we'll do, Mike, is thank you for that. First, do any of the members have any questions for Mike before we let him go and go into a quick executive session?
No.
None for me.
Eddie?
No, none for me.
Okay, Mike, you can go ahead and hang up. Marty, make sure that he gets out. And then Dean, can you go ahead and put us into executive session? What's the motion, Kevin, that a member should make?
You're going to do that now? You still have the IBM audit.
I know, but I want to just, I think we can do this really quickly. Or do you want to do the IBM?
The motion to go into executive session to discuss the financial or credit history of clients of the IDA.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay. Okay. So really fast, because we're going to have to do like a quick 5-minute governance committee after this. But RJ, I know we talked about this with audit committee already about IBM, but just real quickly, do you want to just refresh everybody's, sorry, I'm streaming the other thing just to make sure it's working. So
okay.
Refresh everybody's memories about the IBM audit, the years that we were audited, the amount of money that we owe them, and then I'll fill in the blanks, and then we'll be.
Absolutely. So I believe it was November of last year, we had met to kind of review the final report. And that report covered a period of 4 years, effectively June 1st of 2013 through May 31st of 2017. Of the years that we audited, there was really 1 year that stood out as the major issue, and that was the final year we audited, the year ending May 31st, 2017. So just a brief history. Over the years, we at JGS have worked with countless individuals at IBM, and through those years, it seemed the calculation would be altered slightly, modified in effect every other year or so. But in the final year, there had been a significant overstatement of purchases, and I believe this is kind of tied into the exemption amount. So I guess they exceeded the amount, and they were still paying fees on top of those purchases. So what it was determined was they had overpaid by about $570,000. And through conversations, we agreed that what we're going to try to do is structure kind of a payback period. So every year that they owed us, we would kind of just take it against that balance. And I believe Lori will update kind of the progress she's had with conversations with IBM. But ultimately, the liability has been entered onto the books as of 12/31/19. And you'll see that once we reviewed the financial statement audit. You noted that increase in the liability for that. Anything else, Lori, you think you want me to elaborate on?
I think that's perfect. To RJ's point, I did speak to Wayne Spinet at IBM, and he spoke to the various other departments with which he works, and they are definitely amenable to having this $570,000 basically as a credit against future payments. So for instance, in this June, when we get their payment this year, if it's in excess of 570, it would also obviously be their payment deducted by the 570, and then the balance is what we would get. If their payment is less than 570 this year, that credit would extend to next year. That's that briefly at last month's meeting. I just wanted to two things. First of all, is we would need a motion to formally recommend approval of the full audit to the full board, and then just a consensus that everyone is okay with that structure in terms of the $570,000.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Great.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Excellent. Okay. Any other questions or anything? No?
None.
Great.